Belur Math, Kolkata, the headquarters of the Ramakrishna Math. The divine play started here in this Kali temple in Dakshineshwar, built by Rani Rasmani, where Sri Ramakrishna was appointed as a priest in 1856. He developed intense devotion to Mother Kali and spent long hours in loving adoration of her image, forgetting the rituals of his priestly duties. With his unquenchable thirst for God, Sri Ramakrishna broke the frontiers of Hinduism, glided through the paths of Christianity and Islam, and attained the highest realization through each of them in a short span of time. He expressed the quintessence of his 12-year-long spiritual realizations in a simple dictum: as many faiths, so many paths. But no life was so angelic and impressive, so simple and yet sublime, as that of the Master's own consort, Sharada Devi, who enjoyed the unique privilege of living intimately with him and receiving for years the requisite spiritual training. She was, in fact, an ideal wife as well as a superb nun. Her life was one long stillness of prayer. No wonder that Sri Ramakrishna, at the conclusion of his spiritual practices, worshipped Sharada Devi as the personification of the Divine Mother. 18-year-old Narendranath Datta, on the advice of his school teacher, went to meet Sri Ramakrishna at the Kali temple. It was November 1881. The skeptical young man straightway asked the Master a question which he had put to several others, but had received no satisfactory answer.
Sir, have you seen God?
Without a moment's hesitation, Sri Ramakrishna replied,
Yes, I have. I see him as clearly as I see you, only in a much more intense way.
The unique interaction between the spiritual master and his rational questioning disciple was to last nearly 5 years. Although he was irresistibly drawn to the man of God, Narendra would not take anything on trust, and neither would Ramakrishna have wanted him to. He would say, "Test me as moneylenders test their coins. You must not accept me until you have tested me thoroughly." Eventually, it was not just what Ramakrishna said, but what he was, that finally led Narendra to accept him as his undisputed master. A master who would show him that God exists in man, and the path to God can only end in that realization. Apart from removing doubts from the mind of Narendra, Sri Ramakrishna won him over through his pure, unselfish love. Thus began a guru-disciple relationship which is quite unique in the history of spiritual masters. Narendra now became a frequent visitor to Dakshineshwar, and, under the guidance of the Master, made rapid strides on the spiritual path. Ramakrishna's spiritual heir was taught all that he needed to know. In 1885, Sri Ramakrishna developed cancer of the throat. And as the end neared, critically ill and unable to speak, the Master wrote on a piece of paper, "Naren will teach others." In the small hours of 16th August 1886, Sri Ramakrishna gave up his physical body. After the passing of the Master, 15 young disciples began to live together under the leadership of Narendra. They took formal vows of sannyasa, and a new monastic order was established. But Naren heard the inner call for a greater mission in his life. Despite her glorious past, most of Indian life was sunk in abject poverty, ignorance, and superstition. This was the challenge before him. But it was equally clear that he must first now know more of the country and its problems. So, in the middle of 1890, after receiving the blessings of Sri Sharada Devi, Naren embarked on a long journey of exploration and discovery of India. It was this journey that transformed him from Narendranath Datta to Swami Vivekananda. He walked through the barren country roads, through the bazaars, the palaces of kings, as well as the hovels of the poor. Swami Vivekananda was deeply moved to see the appalling poverty and backwardness of the masses. It was in this context that Vivekananda grasped the crux of the problem in India, being poverty and lack of self-belief among the masses. But the immediate need was to provide food and other bare necessities of life to the hungry millions. His friends and admirers in India wanted him to attend the World's Parliament of Religions to be held in Chicago in 1893. He too felt that the Parliament would provide the right forum to present his master's message to the world. Another reason which prompted Swamiji to go to America was to seek financial help for his mission. With the help of his admirers, Swami Vivekananda left for America, taking the blessings of the Holy Mother. The unknown monk of India suddenly leapt into fame at the Parliament of Religions held in Chicago in 1893.
Sisters and brothers of America, it fills my heart with joy unspeakable to rise in response to the warm and cordial welcome which you have given us.
Upon his return to India, he founded a unique type of organization known as the Ramakrishna Mission, in which monks and dedicated volunteers would jointly undertake the propagation of practical Vedanta and various forms of social service, such as running schools, colleges, rural development centers, orphanages, hospitals, performing arts schools, training, institutions for the disabled, humanitarian services, and cultural centers, as well as conducting massive relief and rehabilitation work for victims of earthquakes, cyclones, and other calamities in different parts of India and other countries. With 130 branches in India, 41 in different parts of the world, from America and Europe to Russia and Japan, all of them based on the essence of Vedanta, the oneness of all being. Vedanta was introduced to Australia in 1897 by Mrs. Elsie Pickett, who was trained by Swami Shivananda, a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, to teach Vedanta to Europeans. In 1908, a Swedish lady, Sister Abhavanya, who was trained in the United States by Swami Abhedananda, a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, came to Australia to spread the message of Vedanta. James Wales, an Australian, inspired by a vision of Swami Vivekananda and later by his writings, visited India in 1927, took initiation from Swami Shivananda and served the mission in India for a few years. Upon his return to Australia, James spread the message of Vedanta through his lectures and discourses until his demise in 1951. Mrs. Wilma Spencer, another Australian, who was inspired by the writings of Swami Vivekananda, was drawn to Vedanta. Invited by Mrs. Spencer, Swami Ranganatha Nandaji visited Australia annually from 1969 to 1983 to deliver lectures and inspire devotees. In 1974, a group of sincere aspirants formed the Vedanta Society of New South Wales, which later became a branch of the Sharada Math in 1982. Pravrajika Ajaya Prana Mataji is the head of this centre in Sydney. Swami Damodaranandaji from Fiji visited Australia regularly and kept the flame of aspiration in the hearts of the devotees. He not only invited senior Swamis like Swami Budeshanandaji, Gahananandaji, Smarananandaji and others from India, but also inspired the devotees to form study groups to learn the life-giving teachings of Vedanta. Mrs. Kanaka Ramakrishna and Mr. B. Ramakrishna furthered the Vedanta movement, and due to their sincere efforts and request of devotees, the Ramakrishna Math at Belur in Kolkata deputed Swami Sridharanandaji in October 2000 to take charge of the centre. He soon took up residence in a rented house at Minor Road, Strathfield, and started conducting classes. The Strathfield Bowling Club was rented for holding the Sunday Gita classes, and later the Vedanta Centre was housed at Redmire Road, Strathfield for nearly 2 years when it was moved to Ashfield. Swami Sridharanandaji's presence inspired devotees in other cities of Australia to start their own centres. Accordingly, in 2003, the Melbourne group bought a property in Vermont, and Swamiji visits them every month and conducts classes. The Canberra group holds classes twice a month on the Bhagavad Gita and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. The group in Adelaide regularly holds classes and occasional spiritual retreats, as well as celebrates holy days. The Brisbane group bought a property in 2008 and is conducting classes every month. Cultural programs are also organised by the centre. In December 2009, the group in Perth bought a church. Regular classes are held here, which is attended by sincere spiritual seekers. The centre in Sydney also conducts conferences on yoga and allied subjects. Eminent speakers from all over the world are invited to participate in such conferences. Children programs are held regularly. Yoga classes, spiritual retreats for devotees, as well as classes on the scriptures are conducted regularly. In order to meet the increasing demands of the community in Sydney, the premises at 2 Stewart Street, Ermington, New South Wales was acquired in October 2006. The centre is a large heritage building on a hilltop with expansive views of Sydney. A new classroom and prayer hall was built in March 2010, where classes and festivals are held. The centre is embarking on a building project consisting of a prayer hall, classrooms, library, bookshop and other facilities. We welcome you all to participate in making this dream a success.